Hello, welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome. You'll see that you should be able to turn on your camera and you should be able to use the chat. Those are the two functions that we've allowed, but everything else is locked down because we have had Zoom bombers at past webinars. Excuse the limitations, but it's going to help us stay really focused on the content tonight. As you can see on the slide, hopefully you can see that we have a presentation already going. If not, try to navigate there. And then I also encourage everybody to locate the chat right away and feel free to put in there what you're hoping to learn tonight. Find the chat and tell us what you're hoping to learn. It's going to be a very full night. As you can see, we have a lot of presenters and a lot of information. So we're really going to rely on the chat for questions. So please put your comments and questions there, and we're going to run right up to the hour. So first, I'd like to introduce Aldo Lopez, and he's got a message for our bilingual participants. Oh, wait, let me make sure that Aldo can unmute himself. One second, Aldo, apologies for that. Aldo should be a co-host. All right, Aldo, apologies for that. You should be good to go.
Thanks, Genevieve. Hola, buenas tardes. Me llamo Aldo Lopez y soy manejador de proyectos con Permit Sonoma. Quería informarles que esta presentación se ofrecerá en español en como una semana en nuestra página web. Pero si tienen alguna pregunta, me la pueden dejar en el chat y con mucho gusto los ayudaré en todo lo que pueda. Muchas gracias. Back to you, Genevieve.
Yes. Okay, we are making sure all of our presenters have hosting capabilities. Again, I'll just say you're all have some limited capabilities in what you can do tonight, but we encourage you to put on your camera and we encourage you to use the chat. And we look forward to a very full night tonight. We're going to go right up to the hour. So that chat function and those questions is really important. Without further ado, next slide, please. 2 slides up. I'd like to introduce our Fire Marshal for Sonoma County, Steve Mosiurchack.
Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Mosiurchack. I'm the Fire Marshal for the County of Sonoma. I want to recognize that this is number 3 of these community outreach meetings. This one is for the Rancho Adobe Fire District. It's to cover an area of Penngrove in the Sonoma Mountain area. The purpose of this meeting today is just to understand the roles and responsibilities and who the collaborators are. So we got your fire districts, CalFire, non-governmental agencies similar to Fire Safe Sonoma, the importance of the residents and fire safe councils and firewires and HOAs and other agencies or nonprofits that have wildfire resilience in mind. The goals for today are to learn what is going to empower the residents to take charge for defensible space and home hardening and what action you could take, and also understanding the resources that are available. One of those resources, next slide, is our free chipping program that the county hosts. It's a year-round program. It's available to all the residents of Sonoma County. You get up to 2 and sometimes more chipping events per calendar year. If you're interested in this free service, you could either apply online for the application after you read the guidelines or contact us by email or by telephone. There's an administrative person that can help you out, answer any questions that you may have. And next slide. And then we're introducing Robert Agaro to talk about the importance for wildfire resilience communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So our Wildfire Resilient Communities program aims to promote whole community wildfire resilience in 3 select communities, which are the Lower Russian River, Guerneville area, Mark West, Larkfield, Wickiup area, and the Penngrove, Sonoma Mountain area. This program aims to accomplish this goal through education, providing free home hardening and defensible space assessments, and coordinating across agencies. Next slide, please. So this program is funded by a phased FEMA grant through the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, or BRIC program. Phase 1 is our project planning and outreach phase and is active right now. This phase ends next September. Phase 2 would fund actual treatment work, including funding for home hardening and defensible space implementation on private properties and vegetation management activities in the wildland. However, in April of this year, FEMA posted an advisory online that they were canceling the BRIC program nationwide while allowing certain projects like ours to continue through its current phase. We have not received official communication from the federal government that our grant has been canceled yet. However, to remain nimble and adapt to changing circumstances, we are seeking other funding opportunities to cover the potential loss of BRIC through other grants for implementation work. Next slide, please. So the heart of what we're doing right now with this program in this phase is our assessments. These are educational only assessments. They are not code enforcement inspections. There's no enforcement associated with this program. So we're able to conduct curbside assessments from the public right-of-way, but would love to see more people sign up for full assessments where qualified assessors walk your property, identify potential fire risk vulnerabilities on your property, and summarize it up in a report free of charge given to you that really concisely puts all that information together. These are available, again, at no cost to the property owner in these 3 project areas, so please sign up or tell your neighbor to so you can get one before the rainy season puts pause on assessments. Now I will hand it off to Caroline Safford and our team of fire prevention experts.
Hi, everybody, and thanks so much for coming to the workshop tonight. It's nice to see folks here. My name's Caroline, and I have been working in fire prevention for the County of Sonoma, focused pretty much exclusively on wildfire risk reduction, so how to not have your house burned down, for about well over 20 years now. So that's my background, and I am going to ask our awesome experts, Chief Ben Nichols, who is with the CalFire Lake Napa Unit, or LNU, and Chief Jeff Villecat from Rancho Adobe, and his sidekick Dan Russo, who are both awesome experts as well in this topic. So if you chiefs could introduce yourselves really briefly, and also what your agencies do. I think that a lot of people don't really understand the difference between what's a local fire agency do and what does CalFire do, and how do those things work together. There you go. Ben.
All right, I'll start it off. So Ben Nichols, CalFire Sonoma Lake Napa Unit. I run our operations here in Sonoma County, what we call the West Division. And CalFire is responsible for the areas that we identify as the state responsibility area in the state. State of California is broken up into local responsibility area, which is your cities and unincorporated in the non-wildland areas of the state, then the state responsibility area, and then what is called the federal responsibility area, FRA. With that, I'll turn it over to Chief Villecat to speak to his role.
Great. Thanks, Chief. Jeff Villecat with Rancho Adobe Fire District. I'm your local area fire chief. And Rancho Adobe Fire District, we cover all of the city of Cotati and then the unincorporated areas of Penngrove, and then all the way around the city of Petaluma on both the east and west side. And primarily for our webinar tonight, we cover a very large amount of Sonoma Mountain all the way up to the top where we meet with the Sonoma Valley Fire District. We cover about 86 square miles in total. We do that with 3 fire stations and a total of 10 people on duty a day. So when you think about the fire risk that we have out there and the number of resources, we rely on our excellent partners at CalFire. And as Chief Nickel mentioned, they cover the SRA, or the state responsibility area, and for the most part, we cover the LRA, or the local responsibility area. But we really both respond to all the fires. It just is a matter of semantics on who has ultimate authority and responsibility and payment requirements. But our goal together is to respond to fires and put them out and to serve the community. Also, a big shout out to Permit Sonoma. We can't do this without our partners also at Permit Sonoma in the Fire Prevention Division. They've been great with funding for community projects. As you heard, the chipper program, our district has already had 1 chipper week this summer, and we have another one coming up in the Liberty Valley area on the other side of our district in actually it's next week. So coming up quickly. Also with the community outreach and the home assessments that have been taking place out on the Hill. So great partnerships with both CalFire and with Permit Sonoma. Continuing on a little bit about what we're doing, talking about CalFire and the massive investment that they're putting into the community through grants, through fuel reduction projects, through fire engines and fire crews doing work in our community, creating better evacuation routes for folks to get out. Also, the ridgetop fuel breaks and the shaded fuel breaks and the wildfire calming zones designed to slow or stop fire at strategic locations. We are working hand in hand with our partners to make this a more resilient and fire adapted communities. A big shout out there. And then right back to, who are we going to? Carol Leone?
Well, Carol Young. So really briefly, I thought we'd talk just a little bit about fire history, because one of the things that's very clear when you look especially at this map on the left is that in our county, we have areas that have seen repeated fire behavior over time, specifically along the eastern border on the Mayacamas, which is just burned over and over. There's another little fire corridor on the west side where the ridges are over there, and a little chunk around where it's now Lake Sonoma. People have asked a lot, gosh, with all of the fire history in other parts of the county, why did you choose Penngrove, which is the area circled in the little red circle, for this program? And there were actually a lot of really good reasons for that. And one of them, and I think Chief Ellicott would definitely agree with this, is that the grass in that mixed oak savanna ecosystem, which typifies your area, I think is a highly underrated fire risk. Fire in grass burns hot, burns fast, and notably, we lose more firefighters in grass fires than we do in forest fires historically. There is risk in these areas, and there hasn't been a lot of fire in that area in the past, with the exception of the Crane Canyon fire, which was in the way back box in 1965. But I think that was a very interesting fire and something that is worth discussing for a few minutes. This is a hand-drawn map from 1965. CalFire was then CDF, and this was the Sonoma Ranger unit. So a couple of changes in names there. But this map only is representing 3 days, September 16th, 17th, and 18th, which is next week. So I think it's really instructive. And on that day, on all 3 of those days, actually, what we had was enormous winds, gusts up to 122 miles an hour recorded at the St. Helena Lookout, until the St. Helena Lookout weather station blew over in the wind. So it must have gotten higher than 122 at some point. So that was a really significant factor. And Chiefs, I'd like to turn this discussion over to you to talk about what's the same, what's different in the fire conditions, what's different in weather, what's different in the patterns of human habitation in these areas, and how does that impact the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump in here and start and just talk about our district a little bit, and then Chief Nichols can talk about the bigger fire picture in the local area here. Carol Leone, you mentioned a great topic, and it's that fire in grass burns fast. It really does. And what we see on TV a lot of times are the mega fires and the very large fires that are burning in brush and in the forests. And we don't necessarily have that on Sonoma Mountain in the area we're focused in, but what we do have are the annual grasses. And we have fires on Sonoma Mountain all year long. We've already had probably a handful, maybe 5 or 6 so far this season. And I expect we'll probably have that many more before the fire season comes to a conclusion and the rain falls. But when fire is burning in grass and there's a little bit of wind on it, it is extremely challenging for us to catch those fires before they get up onto the homes. And that's part of what we're asking your help today, is for you to do that defensible space, provide a buffer for us to be able to get to your home and protect it before the fire catches it on fire. So it's a race. The fire is burning at a certain speed and we're driving at a certain speed, and whichever one gets there first. And for us to get up to a lot of the areas on Sonoma Mountain, it's quite a long haul for us. So the fire often beats us there. And we've had a couple close calls. We have a lot of ignition sources up there with electrical lines, with humans. with fireworks, with vehicles backfiring, parking in the grass. It's an area where we expect that we're going to have fires, and we're looking for help. We're looking for you as homeowners to provide that defense for us so that we can get there and provide the offense. Chief Nichols?
Absolutely, Chief. Nail on the head. The idea here is that you provide the defense, we provide the offense. We talk about fire threat, and our goal as CalFire is to contain 95% of our fires to 10 acres or less. And although it may seem like that's not being accomplished when we have our crazy fire activity events that we do, we still have yet to have a year where we don't meet that goal that we've set for ourselves. But what that creates is that opportunity during those catastrophic fire weather conditions that there's not enough fire engines to go around. There's not enough fire engines that can mobilize quick enough, fast enough, in the right locations to prevent that fire from becoming a major conflagration and or destroying and damaging people's homes and livelihood. What we see here in 1965 has been repeated, right? This is a year after the 1964 fires with the Tubbs fire and the Nuns fire. The Hanley, you could get it confused because they're the same footprint, which allows us to talk about the fire effects off of that topography wind alignment. So when we have those offshore winds, those are the most damaging wind events that we're going to have, and the lay of the land funnels that fire and creates fire flow avenues for that fire to repeat the same footprint over and over. So obviously those are top on our list of priority project areas to hit because we know that it's going to happen again. But as we were talking about before the meeting tonight, the landscape of 1964, the 1950s, the 1940s, in this case, the 1965 series, think about what the home impact on the landscape was in 1965 versus 2025. And so we experienced that during the Nuns fire in 17, where the fire came and threatened Runner Park for a little bit there. Luckily, the wind stopped blowing, right? So at the end of the day, while those winds are blowing, we react to that fire. And then once the wind stops blowing and we have an opportunity to bring those resources to bear, now we can take that proactive assault back to the fire. But in those early hours, if homeowners haven't provided that defense for us to be able to get the fire around those homes, in a perfect world, we would love to say that we're going to defend all of the homes out there. But in the perfect world, if you've done your job as a homeowner and hardening and providing that defensible space for your home can survive without a fire engine parked at your house. And that's what we're really looking for, right? Because in those early hours of the fire, when we talk about a Tubbs fire, a glass fire, those fire events that by the peak of the firefight, we've got hundreds of fire engines at that fire. In the first 4, 5, 6 hours of that firefight, we're lucky to have around 100 fire engines. And so if you think about the different communities at risk, we run out of fire engines long before we run out of homes to defend. And so we absolutely rely on homeowners doing their part to make sure that their home has the best chance of survival during that firefight.
Great. Thanks, you guys. That was great. So now we're going to move on and talk a little bit about how you, the residents, can help us to help you. Because we can't do our job or they can't do their job as firefighters without your skin in the game in this thing. And that includes defensible space, hardening homes, planning and preparing for the safety of your family, and learning what you need to learn to do all this stuff. Before I move on from this slide, I want everybody to really take a look at that photo that we're seeing here, as this is what we're up against, and we really will be focusing more on this as we move forward. So about protecting your home from wildfire, the last 15, 20 years have really been seminal years for us learning more about exactly what it is that makes houses catch on fire during wildland fires. And we have learned a lot because A, we've been paying attention, and B, we've had a lot to learn from. We've had a lot of very large, very destructive fires in the last 10 or 15 years. Overall, we've identified there's a bunch of risks, that most of which are probably within 30 feet of your home. And many of the solutions to mitigate those risks can be carried out at low or no cost. So you can do a lot to help protect yourself without having to spend a lot of money. And today we'll be focusing on the things that we think are the most important, mostly within that 30 feet for you to do. Basically, there are two tools. There are two things to look at. We've got defensible space. Defensible space is in 3 zones. Zone 1, zone 0, which is coming to a code near you soon. It's not in the state defensible space code yet, but it will be, they promise. Zone 0, which is what we'll be talking a lot about because it is so critical, is from the house walls or the edge of the deck out for 5 feet. That area should really be non-combustible. Zone 1 goes from that 5-foot area out to 30 feet. This is your sweet zone for doing risk reduction between the house and 30 feet. Zone 2, which goes from 30 to 100 feet, we call that the wildland fuels reduction area. It's important to do, and should you do it? Yes, for the health of your ecosystem as well as the ability to drop fire back down onto the ground. But the first thing you need to focus on is zone 0. Get that done with zone 1, preferably at about the same time. So mostly today we're going to be focusing on zone 0 and zone 1. These things, defensible space, is regulated by code, so you can be forced to do this if somebody writes you a ticket for it. And that's regulated through the Public Resource Code as well as through Sonoma County Code Chapter 13A. Different from that is home hardening, which is every bit, and I personally think maybe a little more, important to start to work on than the defensible space. It is not regulated by code unless you're building a new house. So there are no rules that are going to make you do these things, which have been proven over and over to be really important for keeping your house from igniting. That includes the zone 0, your roof, your vents and openings, wooden attachments like fences, windows and siding are the main categories we'll be talking a little bit about. But I think one of the most important things that we really have to focus on, because it is the thing, is embers. The vision in most of our brain, Chief Ellicott mentioned this earlier, is of a giant wall of flame coming towards the house and everything exploding in flame in its path. The truth is that 90% of the time, a house is burned down because of something that's roughly the size of a pea, or maybe even a baseball or a softball, but something very small, not by that wall of flame. That usually passes by the house, and then what it leaves in its wake, which is a giant pile of embers, is what will actually take the house out. So we really have to understand the critical nature of that. And the best visual I have for this, which is an ancient video, and I apologize for the quality here, but this really shows what we're up against. So we have a fire burning off in the distance. We have firefighters on scene. Yay. This is a broom that was under the wooden deck of this house, surrounded by flammable materials. That broom would have been enough to make this house burn down. This is the kind of thing that we really need to look at, because the broom would have caught the chair, would have caught the next thing, it would have moved up onto the deck, and the house most likely would have burned because of that broom. So you really need to think small. Dan Russo is going to talk a little bit about some of the really important things that means, and especially as they pertain to zone 0. Take it away,
Yes.
Dan.
Thank you, ma'am. So one thing I just wanted to add to that previous slide too, that was in all capitals, was all structures. A lot of homeowners, when I go out and meet them, tend to think of just zone 0 around their house, but it also applies to detached garages, outbuildings, sheds. Those should all have their own zone 0 as well, because if you get any vegetation burning up to those, they're going to burn. So you want to have that defensible space.
Especially if those structures are within 30 feet of your primary structure.
Correct. So when I'm out and about doing my inspections, these are going to be some of the things that I'm looking for and talking to the homeowner about. Mulch and plant debris. So in zone 0, I don't like to see any type of vegetation, any type of mulch, anything that can burn up to a house, especially if you have any type of wood siding. So easy fixes for those, sometimes they can get costly, is putting in some type of rock, decomposed granite, concrete. But if you are working on a budget, even just removing that and just taking it down to bare dirt, that would be the safest way. It might not be the best looking way, but a house being burned down also doesn't look very good looking. Plants, definitely want to have anything with a high oil content like rosemary, Juniper, cypress, definitely don't want those in the first 5 and even in the first 30 feet. The saying of lean, clean, and green. If you do have good spacing and with some type of succulents, again, we'd rather not see it, but that's going to be something that's not going to be as hazardous as a fountain grass or, again, as a high oil content type of plant. And then we've all got stuff. We've got jute floor mats. We've got umbrellas. We've got sunshades, garbage cans. Those are all types of things that can catch on fire. So again, if you have those in the first 5 feet, we'd like to see those moved out past that area.
And you can certainly, we all got to live. You might have cushions on your deck chairs. If it's bad fire weather, take them in before you go to work. Don't leave them out there. Very common cause of ignition of decks are those cushions and stuff like that.
And a good replacement for one of the jute floor mats that I talk to people is just getting one of those rubber types of floor mats, because the jute will burn and the rubber generally will not.
Plants, nothing combustible within 5 feet. In that zone 1 area, you can have plants, and the succulents are great so long as they're separated and in islands. So what you want is for the plants not to be able to burn straight across the landscape up to your house. So you can have some plants, just not very many, and preferably nothing in zone 0. Your insurance company is going to say absolutely no plants in zone 0. So if your insurance is keeping your insurance is important, you might want to really look at nothing in zone 0. The code is probably going to allow for some plants in zone 0. So you may be able to have some non-combustible pots with plants in them within that area. And it's a decision you'll have to make. But usually when it comes down to what's the law and are you going to keep your insurance, probably is going to win. So just be ready for that. All right.
Caroline, sorry to interrupt, but we had a comment that it's important to mention that the new Zone 0 requirements will ultimately apply to existing buildings and not just new construction. So for now, it's new construction, but it will be code for all of us at some point.
All of us in the state responsibility area
Yes.
until we update the local code for the local responsibility area.
Yep.
And it's the secret sauce.
Yep.
This is really what I think people have to do. Dan, you want to take attachments or?
Sure, I'm happy to handle this. So the first thing we see on here is fences. So if a fence catches on fire, it will follow that fence line, and generally one side of the fence will lead up to your home. The last few years, what we've really been pushing is for people to replace the first 5 feet up against your siding with a non-combustible, whether that's a metal fence, a fence made from an ignition resistant material like a hardy or some other type of non-combustible product. If you do have a wooden fence and you are asked to evacuate, we do request that you keep your fence open, so that way if your fence does catch fire, it won't burn all the way up to the home. Decks, same thing. If you plan on replacing your deck or building a new deck, again, use ignition resistant materials. There's products out there. People have heard of Azek or TimberTech or Trex. Those are just some of the products available that are out there that are ignition resistant and not designed to burn under normal conditions. Other things that you can see in the photo on the far right are pergolas, wood stacked up against the home, some type of tool shed. Again, those are things that we're not going to want to see up against a house just because they're combustible and they can burn. So if you have something that you can move, again, move that at least 5 feet away so you can give yourself some defensible space.
And just emphasizing on decks, when a deck starts a house fire, typically the thing that starts the deck on fire is a thing on the deck. So one of the really good no-cost things that you can do to help mitigate the risk of having a wooden deck, and I chose to get rid of mine, which are all now non-combustible surfaces, but make sure you keep it really clean on top. Make sure you don't let the leaves and stuff pile up between the deck boards and the ledgers, and do not store anything flammable under that deck.
If I can add one thing to that as well. So as you guys are out cleaning your deck normally on the weekend or whenever you're doing it, if you notice where you get a buildup of leaves, generally it was going to be your inside corners. That's the same area that the embers are going to burn. So if you notice that you have a lot of leaves around a wood pile in an inside corner, again, that's going to be something that should heighten your awareness on making sure that's a clear area, because again, if leaves are gathering there during the wind, that's where your embers are going to gather.
And you can mitigate some of those risks. And we're going to show you a publication in a few slides that'll show you some ways that you can actually help reduce that risk. So openings are a really huge things on structures, and mostly what we have for homes, most homes have vents because you have to have vents to keep the underlayment of the roof from getting rotten. So we have these vents that let air in. Code used to be for a 1/4-inch mesh, which is plenty big enough to allow for the intrusion of embers into the structure. That's especially a concern if you have something like a gable in vent and you have stuff, flammable items stored up there in the end of the structure. Foundation vents can also have risk if there's anything that's flammable in the crawl space under the house. There are roof vents. Some of them are certified for wildland and some of them aren't. So you might have to do some research to figure out what your roof vent is. There's those little bird hole vents that you'll see in an open eave with a round vent, like in that photo in the top right. And then that's an enclosed eave below. Eave is really the best thing for wildfire. As mitigations go, it's expensive and difficult, so a lot of things to do first, but that's a good thing to try to move towards. So to take care of this problem, simply all you got to do is cover those 1/4-inch mesh screens with an 1/8-inch mesh screen. And there are a bunch of products out there on the market for that. Go down to the hardware store and get them. Or you can replace them with a product approved by the Office of the State Fire Marshal for use in wildland urban interface areas. But those products are expensive. The mesh, not as bad. So can't recommend that enough. While we're on openings, commonly missed opening for most folks is the dog door, right? I have one. It's pretty hard to mitigate those because the covers for those, if you have time and you remember to cover it before the wildfire comes, that covering is usually plastic. So they are a risk. Be aware of that. Roofs are also a huge risk, and a Class A roof is what you need to have. And that means that the covering material, be it asphalt shake or tile or metal, whatever, and the things that are under that have both been certified to be fire resistant, right? A Class A roof is only Class A for as long as the roof is rated for. So if you bought a 40-year roof 50 years ago, it is no longer Class A and you need to look at replacing it. If you don't know the class of your roof or what its time limitations were, that's a great idea to get a roofer to come and do an assessment for you. And don't be fooled by thinking that, oh, my roof is tile, that isn't going to burn. Tile roofs do have a lot of risk. Dan can talk about this. He sees a lot in inspections. But like on a barrel tile roof, for example, if you don't have the end of those tiles stopped so that the birds can't get in there and make nests and the embers can't blow in there, they're really high risk.
Yeah, if you think
Dan?
about the size and diameter of a pine needle burning through the sky on fire, think about how small that is. So any hole that's bigger than that, it can get through. So even if these front of these tiles that have been starting to be closed off, you can see all the ones above it. Those are probably 1/8 of an inch gap, and you can definitely fit thousands of embers into there. Again, the more you can seal up your roof, the better, especially with a tile roof.
Super important because the roof is a big flat surface, so it's an ember catcher. Windows are also a risk. This photo on this slide, the photo on the left, is a picture that I took after a structure fire that took place down here. So there was a house here, it is gone. It did catch these surrounding redwoods on fire. But the window that you see here in the middle photo, that window is identified with the red circle on the first photo. So that is the distance from the house on fire that was exposed to enough heat that annealed glass cracked. This is a dual pane window, so the second pane allowed it survived. This wasn't a problem. But that's why the windows that you want should be 2 panes, ideally both tempered. By law, one of them can be tempered, but you definitely want those dual pane windows and they need to be pretty intact. There is some help for doing that. The Sonoma County Energy Independence Program does provide, it's not a loan, it's a lien on your house, but they will pay for all kinds of different wildfire mitigation measures, from zone 0 creation to replacing windows or roofs and so on. So that's something to check out. Siding is usually the first place people go when they think about risk. Oh my gosh, my siding's wood. I'm never. Actually, if you are good about your mitigations in zone 0 and zone 1, you can reduce a lot of the risk to that wooden siding if the siding is relatively intact. This photo, I'm using it again on purpose because you can see the window. It was hot enough to crack the window, but we don't have any impact on that highly vulnerable cedar shake siding that's next to it. So it's not as big a risk as, say, the glass might be or the window might be itself. If your siding looks like the one in the middle, yeah, you got an issue and you got to deal with it, and it should be replaced. But this is usually a lower priority fix and a very expensive one. So don't get stuck thinking that because you have wooden siding, you're doomed. You're not. You just need to pay more attention to some of the other stuff. And do these things work? Here's a video that I think shows pretty conclusively that it works really well. So we have drip torches igniting flammable siding on one side of the screen, where we have a 5-foot non-combustible zone house on the right side of the screen. So that siding has really, that mulch has really taken off. It's already burning up to the fence.
And it doesn't take a lot of wind blowing on that mulch to get it to really flame. And then once your fence catches on fire up against your siding, especially if it's a combustible siding, it's not going to take long for that whole side of your home to catch on fire. And Chief Nichols said, if this is early on in a large incident and there's only so many fire engines per neighborhood, you might only get one fire engine in your cul-de-sac of 4, 6, 8, 10 homes. So what you can do today and tomorrow might help you out next week or a month down the line, because then you've made your home defendable, like the building on the right. You can see that's burned up to that hardscape, but you've given yourself a 5-foot buffer and it has a metal fence. So now, even with a little bit of wind on it, that flame length cannot get close enough to your house, and your house has saved itself without having any suppression effort. And now that fire engine can go to one of your neighbors' homes and attempt to save their house.
Yeah, and no suppression on that, no suppression, and that structure survived. So that is really important, and I think you really need to bear that in mind. This publication here, the Wildfire Home Retrofit Guide, this is an awesome publication for property owners wanting to find the things to do that can reduce their risk. If you have a roof that has a place where a bunch of stuff is going to pile up against the wall, you can reduce the risk on the wall without all kinds of hints like that. What do I do about my wooden deck? All kinds of hints about that. So I highly recommend this publication, and I think they are going to put this in the chat. So moving on to what we have seen from in our assessments that we've done with the Wildfire Resilient Program in your area. A lot of the stuff that we would expect. Full disclosure, we haven't done as many full assessments in this area as we have in other places. A lot of gates, a lot of non-accessible parcels, and we really need you guys to sign up to get this full assessment. Anywhere in this area that's identified on the map, you are eligible for one of those assessments. So I'd really encourage you to sign up for one, because having someone stand at your house and tell you the same stuff that Dan and I just told you works really well. Education is key, so you can sign up for that. They're going to put all these links in the chat. Do check out the Home Retrofit Guide. Readyforwildfire.org is another really good place to go. That's CalFire's site. It's divided up into prepare before the fire, what to do during the fire, and how to recover, as well as the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. They have a giant lab in South Carolina where they have ember generating machines that they can fill full of stuff and build an entire house in a barn and blow embers at it and see where did they get in, where were they a problem, how big were they when they were a problem. So a lot of the research that has been used to base the information on that we're talking about today came out of the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. All kinds of great stuff on there. They also are now coming up with the inspection criteria that the insurance companies, some of them are using to tell you what you have to do in order to keep insurance. So highly recommended to get on their site and take a look at Wildfire Prepared Home and what that means, so you can get ahead of that in case it comes to a home near you. When we do these assessments, we leave a little door hanger that has a code on it that's handwritten in there. And you can access your report by going to this website and popping on it, and then you're going to enter your property code, and then we'll show you your report. If you do a full report, there's a whole lot of information. If you've just had the curbside, that's a great opportunity to sign up for the full. But there's a summary that gives you the top priority issues, both defensible space and structure hardening, and other things you can do to reduce your risk. That ends up with a checklist. If you got a curbside and if you got the door hanger, please sign in and get that, and sign up for a full assessment while you're at it. If you're having trouble signing in or you don't know what to do, feel free to reach out by email to wrc@sonomacounty.gov or call us at 565-8575. And we'll put all of this information in the chat as well. There's a QR code there too that'll send you there. So taking actions, start small. Think of the smaller, easier stuff to do. Take care of that first. Right next to the house, do your raking, remove some of those plants, look at your stuff. And then use your assessment report to prioritize what you want to do when. You can hire contractors to do this work, hire carefully. And now, Chief Ellicott, you want to talk about emergency resources.
Absolutely. And before I get to emergency resources, I really want to tie back into a couple things that we hit on here. One is that in a wildfire, your house will burn down from the outside in. In a regular structure fire, your home burns from the inside out. And it really is those embers being blown onto your landscape that is going to burn your house down. And the very first picture that we saw in this presentation was a true picture where all of the mulch in the front of the house in a cul-de-sac in a non-wildland setting was on fire and had a real threat to be able to burn that home down. And each of the people on the presentation tonight have seen that occur time and time again. So we are asking you to help us help you, and this is your opportunity to do some defensible space work. And it can be very inexpensive or it can be very expensive. And also on the home hardening, it can be very inexpensive and it can be very expensive. It depends which route you choose. Now, if you either weren't in the area that we were doing assessments and you're on the call tonight and you would like an assessment, the district will come out and do that for you at no cost. We are more than happy to. Our goal is to get the information to you and help you have a defensible home to help us bring the offense. And if you are in that area, please do engage and sign up for that full assessment. It's free. It's information for you. It's a plan. It's a guide that will walk you through step by step what the priorities are to help create a more defensible space and a more hardened home for you. Now, when we talk about emergency resources and evacuation, information is key. So we all know that summertime is typically when we have fires. However, this year we had them as early as January and they were devastating in the southern half of the state. You need to be tuned into what's happening in your area. And one of the best ways is through SoCo Emergency. It's the alerting system for the county. It is what is going to activate on your cell phone when there's an emergency in your area and when you need to be notified of an evacuation. And on that website, you can also look and see what your evacuation zone is. Actually all of Sonoma Mountain has about 5 different evacuation zones. There are 5J1, 5J2, 5E1, etc. So know what your evacuation zone is and sign up for SoCoEmergency.org. And during the summertime, pay attention to what's happening, what the fire weather is. Another great tool that's free is Watch Duty. If you go to watchduty.org, it is a homegrown app that grew out of lack of information during a fire here in Sonoma County. And this program now is extremely robust. You can sign up for it and it will either alert you for fires in your area. It will provide you real-time, accurate information that's being vetted in real time by people that are trained to know what to listen for and be able to pass that information along to you. It also has the ability for you to click on our fire cameras, which there is an extremely robust system of fire cameras in the state of California that you can access from a computer, from your cell phone. You can access those either through Watch Duty or through alertcalifornia.org. Both of those will allow you access to those cameras, and you can see what's happening with that fire. Now, Nixle is also a great resource. Sonoma County uses Nixle to push out information about a whole variety of things that they want you to know about. Nixle allows you to pick that you want information on everything, or you only want to receive a Nixle when it's a true emergency. So it allows you to choose. It provides you more information. Now, when we get into talking about evacuations, there's two different terms that you hear. You'll hear evacuation warning, which means be prepared to evacuate. And there's an evacuation order that means go now. So if you are living in an area that has restricted evacuation routes, one way in, one way out, such as Sonoma Mountain Road, Lynch, Roberts Road, all of the above coming down off the mountain, you probably, when you get that evacuation warning, you want to go. Don't wait for it to be an evacuation order. If you have livestock, animals, if you're simply concerned, or if you're elderly and you know it's going to take you a little bit more time, let's get evacuated at the evacuation warning. Because remember, your firefighters are trying to make their way up through those same roads that you're evacuating on. So the sooner that you're out and you're out of the way and allow the fire equipment to get in there, the better it is for us. So that's what we recommend. If you're concerned, just go. But always, when you get an evacuation order, we want you to leave. For your safety, to allow us to get in to do our work and protect your home. So as you've heard us talk about today, set your home up for success with defensible space, with home hardening, get out of harm's way when an evacuation warning or order is in place, and allow the firefighters to get in there and do the job to protect the homes and put the fire out. I think that hit all of the points. I had one more point actually that I wanted to hit, and it was mentioned earlier, and that is CalFire's website is a tremendous resource for preparing to evacuate or just simply being prepared for any type of emergency, not just fire. And if you go on there, look for Ready, Set, Go, we encourage you to have a go bag, a backpack, a bag ready to go every day of the year, 24 hours a day, in a safe place where if you receive that evacuation warning or order, you can grab that go bag for you, your wife, your husband, your children, your parents, whoever it is. Grab that go bag, which should have a list of your medication, should have clothing, should have a little bit of money. If you go to CalFire's website, it's going to tell you how to build that bag and how to be prepared. So please use that free resource. And if there's one thing I could leave you with, it is that concept of you provide the defense, we bring the offense, and be prepared through having that go bag.
Great wrap up, Chief. Thank you very much. So that would finally like to ask you to make sure and sign up for our email list. If you're in that project footprint, all we have is the assessor's data, which is a mailing address. So if you want to be kept abreast of what's going on and have you gotten funding for phase 2 and how do I sign up, please sign up for our email update list, which you can do through that code. And I know that Christine has been busily pasting all of the important links in the chat as well. So please do sign up. And again, we say thank you so much for coming today. And I think that we do have a little bit of time for questions and answers or last comments.
Leon, as we wait for questions to come in. Oh, there we go. Good. As we wait for those questions to come in, one of the other things I wanted to leave the crowd with is that we're all human, right? And so things in our daily lives get in the way. So while we should be maintaining our defensible space all the time, it is a great reminder when the Weather Service talks about a red flag warning or watch coming into play, that you take that time to take that inventory of your house, to Chief Eloquet's point, make sure that go bag's ready to go, make sure your family knows their plan for the evacuation, but you're also doing that lap around the house and what leaves haven't I picked up recently? What wood chairs can I get off the deck? What can I get away from the house to reinforce the good work that you've already done to make sure it's just that last little bit prepped, ready before that fire shows up?
Thanks, Ben. We did get one question in the chat about where can we find a list of materials and plants that are fire resistant. And first on the plant list, I have mixed feelings about plant lists. The general rule of thumb is that if you brush it up with your fingers and it smells strong and it has a papery bark, it's probably a highly flammable plant species because it's got those aromatic oils, which are why you smell it. And so that is definitely going to be a high-risk plant. There are a lot of other high-risk plants out there. Bamboo, because it's messy. There's a lot of them. But the most important thing about plants is placement and maintenance. Plants need to, they don't have plants that are in that 5-foot zone, especially in inside corners or near vents or windows. So a lot of the plants is about the placement and the spacing. Make sure you have plants that are, you can have some juniper out there, so long as if that juniper pile catches on fire, it's not going to move the fire to your house. So I think that's the most important thing to think about with plants. Fire safe materials list, you can take a look at the retrofit guide that's in the chat. There's also the Office of the State Fire Marshal, which is a list that's made for pretty much for new construction. It can be difficult to navigate around, but that also has a lot of information on fire resistant materials for decks, walls, doors, vents, all of that stuff. Office of State Fire Marshal. And Christine, that link is in the presentation. You could drop it in the chat. It's on one of those screens that we went flying by.
I'm sorry, which list?
It's the OSFM.
Yes, okay, I will find that and put it in the chat. And Chief Nichols, did you see the question about why did CalFire up the risk rating for so many areas when the insurance companies are using that as an excuse to cancel policies?
So that's part of a regular update to the fire hazard severity zone. So we took the current weather data, the current fire history that hadn't been taken into account, obviously, the last time that this had been done. And so that creates a more representative risk to yourself, the fire hazard of the fire occurring in that area based on current fire data and fire weather data to go with that. So we understand that there's a concern, but at the end of the day, we need you to have an informed knowledge of what the hazard is for that area that you live in.
And just to clarify, there is a difference between hazard and risk. Hazard is something that exists on the landscape. My favorite way to describe this is if you're swimming in the ocean and if there's an ocean and a shark, the shark is a hazard. The shark is not a risk unless there's a person, right? And so hazard is the topography, the likelihood of high wind events, it's the vegetation and all of that. And hazard is different from risk, and it's an important thing to realize. The other thing I wanted to really emphasize is that the insurance companies have their own hazard and risk maps. They aren't really using the state maps in any case that I've ever heard about. They want their own risk. And so the hazard risks that CalFire, State of Oregon had a lot of trouble with this too. It's not quite the case that the insurance company is canceling you because of the CalFire maps. They're not. They're canceling you because they're in the business to make money. And they also know where the risk is. And so they're trying to rejigger their loss portfolio to be more functional moving on into the future. So yeah, it's a scary thing when risk mat comes out and suddenly people get canceled, but they're usually not related. And we've said that over and people tend to not believe it, but it's true.
And there's another component where, again, the modeling has been tweaked and improved from historical legacy modeling type deals where wildland fire modeling really struggles when it comes to the built environment, that it's been designed to address the vegetation types across the landscape. And when you talk about neighborhoods, that's not something that the systems were designed to do. So that's where you're going to see some of that intrusion into the LRA, the local responsibility area, identifying those high and very high fire hazard severity zones, that there's that real world hazard from a catastrophic wildland fire burning into that built environment, which then helps with the local code adoption and or building standards to make sure that those communities, when new construction takes place, have taken that hazard into account.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you, presenters, for keeping us on task and on schedule. And I thank you, everybody, property owners who joined us. And hopefully you learned something new and you took several tidbits away that can help you as you help to reduce the risk of your wildfire, or help a risk of wildfire on your property and ultimately in your community, so that we can hopefully make this a very mild fire season